Good evening. My name is Dr. John R. Guerra, and I have the great privilege of introducing and asking some great questions of Judge Ysmael Fonseca, who's going to be running for District 13th Court of Appeals, that is for the lower Rio Grande Valley. I myself got to meet Judge Fonseca about 2 years ago when he was running for a local court here in Hidalgo County, and I was running for the House District 41. So our campaigns covered a lot of the same area, and so we got to know each other quite well. So without any further ado, we'll get started here as we ask some questions of Judge Fonseca. What is the difference in a conservative versus a liberal judge?
Well, Dr. Guerra, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And actually, I must add that we've actually known each other a little bit longer than 2 years ago, as you were a board member of the local McAllen Pregnancy Center, where my
Correct.
wife was working for a couple of years, doing some great work. So it's been a while, and I really appreciate you doing this evening. And as to your question, is the difference between a conservative and a liberal judge. Conservative judges adhere to the philosophy that the interpretation of laws is based on exactly how they were written, looking at the definition of the words as they were written at the time that the laws and the Constitution were enacted. And unfortunately, our liberal colleagues tend to insert their opinion as to what the law should be when being applied. So they don't really concentrate on what it is that our community, our legislature was thinking at the time of the enactment of a particular law or clause or amendment to the Constitution. They see the Constitution and the laws of our state and the United States as being living, as breathing documents that are open to interpretation and changes in time. The conservative judges would certainly disagree that they are open to that broad of an interpretation. We need to look at the black letter law and see what that means, not really look at what we think it means. So that's a very big distinction between conservative and liberal.
Excellent. And that's going on all across the country right now in the big differences that we're having to deal with in both political but just daily life. Judge, why do you consider yourself a conservative judge?
Well, first, going back to the previous question, my record shows and indicates that I've always adhered and been strict in their interpretation of the law. If the people of the community don't like the law, then it's up to their state representatives to change that law. And because I've been ruling that way in my experience as a judge, that is why I consider myself a conservative judge. Not only that, I'm also very proud of supporting our law enforcement community, which has lately been coming under attack. I have, in my 10 years of private practice, I'm proud to say that I've defended several of our law enforcement in my community from frivolous lawsuits. I put great value in faith, in how we should teach our children to live our lives. Unfortunately, patriotism has changed in our communities. We no longer look up to the flag. We are constantly seeing the division in communities between liberals and conservatives, and the attacks, the Black Lives Matter movement, which has created such a disunity in our community, and that's something I don't stand behind. So that makes me conservative, and that's who I am.
Excellent answer there. So I know that you brought about some of these qualifications right now. What would be the difference in your qualifications while you were a judge here in Hidalgo County and now moving on once you're elected to the Court of Appeals? What would be the difference in those qualifications?
I am a student of Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett. I went to Notre Dame Law School, and she was a professor there when I studied law. And I tell people the very basics of what I know as a lawyer, as a judge, I received from our Supreme Court Justice, Amy Barrett. She taught evidence and civil procedure, and that's something I do day in and day out. And it was an amazing opportunity to have been her student, and very proud to call Justice Barrett also my professor.
Well, as this appellate court moves on in District 13, there's how many judges that sit on this court?
There are 6 judges on the Court of Appeals. And at this time, there are 4 Democrats and 2 Republicans. Last year, we elected those 2 Republicans to the bench. And now we have an opportunity to flip one of those Democratic seats.
Excellent. That would be fabulous.
Absolutely.
And as we move forward here, in the challenges that we are going to be facing, what are some of those big challenges once you become elected that you see District Court 13 needing to be addressed?
Well, part of my campaign in Hidalgo County last year as a district court judge was fighting nepotism, favoritism, and the type of judges that unfortunately look at what type of results they want in a case, and then try to mesh the law and contort it to a point where it would lead to the result that they want. So being on the Court of Appeals, you have to be very wary of that. And you need to make sure that the law that was applied can actually be applied as the judges intended to. You need to make sure that when judges look at results first and what they want the result to be, that's when you need to step in as an appellate court and say, that's not how you practice law, first of all, and that's certainly not how you preside over a case in a trial court. So that's going to be one of those challenges that, as a court, we're going to have to be looking at very closely, because unfortunately, our trial courts have let us down, and we've seen that recently a couple years ago, where one of the trial judges who later became a Court of Appeals judge was convicted because of bribery. So it's not a distant past. It's part of the reality of our present, that we have judges that unfortunately do not uphold their oath.
Right. In the whole big picture of the judicial system right now, okay, what do you think are the biggest challenges, okay, just for the whole judicial system? And how would you make any effects or make differences there once you're elected?
I see two big issues mostly. One of them is mental health issues that need to be dealt with at the trial court level, and that which need to be elevated and talked about. As a district court judge, I did everything I could to bring awareness to the fact that many people in our community are suffering from mental health issues and substance abuse. And it is unfortunate that these individuals, our family members, our friends, are not getting the treatment necessary to avoid going into that cycle of drug abuse, of crime. So there's a big connection between the two. And if we don't treat it early, then you end up having a lot of people suffering from mental health issues and substance abuse that end up going to jail unnecessarily. So we need to attack that problem. Now, I know that's a policy issue, something that the legislature needs to deal with, and they'll have to take a look at it. But there's an interesting statistic which I learned of as a district court judge, that for every dollar that we spend to treat mental health and substance abuse issues, we could end up saving $4 in our civil justice system, in our criminal justice system. So it is well worth our investment to try to make things better for people in our community who are suffering from mental health issues and from substance abuse. And as an appellate court, I will continue to bring awareness to those issues, and I will try to give priority to those cases where people need people that are suffering from mental health issues and substance abuse get prompt and early results. Now, the other issue which is really concerning for the judiciary right now is the backlog of cases in our courts. Because of COVID last year, trials came to a halt. In Hidalgo County, I presided over the last case, criminal case, tried by a jury in March of 2020. The very next case that was tried in Hidalgo County was not until a couple of weeks ago. We're talking about July 2021. That's a whole 1 year and 3 months since the last case was tried. We typically try in the courthouse 7 to 10 trials every single week before COVID. So you can imagine we've had hundreds of cases that could have been tried in the past year and 3 months that have not been tried. So there's been a huge backlog. And with that backlog comes the fact that people that are accused of crimes aren't able to get speedy trials. And that's a concern for any court, and especially the appellate court, which needs to uphold the rights of people to be heard, the right of people to be heard expeditiously and without any delay.
Wow. Wow, I didn't know that. You know, I'm a physician, so I'm not close to the legal field. And so just knowing that is tremendous information for myself. If fortunately I take the next step again for House District 41. But could you also talk to us a little bit, because I know that we have talked in the past that you have a personal concern in what's going on in Cuba, not only just on this judicial field that we want. So I want people to know that you're just a regular person also, because that's very important, that we don't stratify ourselves and that we're able to talk to everybody from all stratifications of life. And so could you elaborate a little bit about this personal information so that the public can know a little bit more about you concerning Cuba?
Sure, and you're right. You know, typically judges are seen in their black robes and seen from far away, not taking any positions on anything. But when it comes to socialism, communism, I can't sit silent. I'm the son of a Cuban immigrant. Hey. My father fled communist Cuba when he was just a child, and he made darn sure he didn't raise a democratic socialist. So I'm very proud of to say that I'm not.
Great.
So, and I'm sure he's smiling right now if he's watching. But it's lately the fact that people have been taking the streets in Cuba and exercising their God-given right to ask for freedom has been so encouraging, because they've been subject to a tyrant. They've been subject to a regime that has denied them basic liberties, not to mention poverty. So I speak up against that. I exercise my First Amendment right on their behalf because they don't have that same right. And I will continue to do so. It's very painful to see we still have family in Cuba, and to think that I have the privilege of living in one of the greatest nations on earth, and just 90 miles away from the coast of the United States, we have a regime which will lock up people for speaking up. That's something that we've seen. And I don't want people to stop talking about it, because the more that we talk about what's going on in other parts of the world, even if it's not in our community, is going to help them. It's going to invigorate people on the island to speak up, to say, we have allies outside of the confines of this island. And it's it's worth fighting for. And it's something that our forefathers in America did. And it's something that every person on earth should be able to fight for. So I encourage the Cuban people to continue asking for those liberties, to ask for freedom, because if we're not free, are we truly human?
Excellent. Excellent. And so that's great to know about that. And so I wanted the people and the viewers here to know a little bit about that information. One last little bit of a topic that I'd like to ask is, there's supposed to be a total delineation or a wall between state and religion. And is there anything that you could allude to or educate me about that subject? Because I've always wondered how we can keep state and religion out when that is so close to us.
I don't believe that there is this wall, this separation of church and state is actually in our Constitution. It was in a letter to the Baptist Convention, or not the Baptist Convention, but a church convention back in the early 1800s, I believe. And I'm gonna look it up, and I'm gonna post it on my Facebook page for people to see that comes from a letter, not from the Constitution. A letter written by, I believe it was James Madison. And the First Amendment was drafted to keep the government from imposing religious views, to keep the government from establishing a church, just like the English government established the English church. It doesn't mean that our faith as Christians, as Jews, for whatever denomination or faith, it doesn't mean it cannot reflect what we do. It doesn't mean it can't give us an insight into what should be done, because faith is part of who we are. Our belief in God, in morality, in whatever you want to call it, instructs our way of thinking and our way of doing things. So there can be no separation between a strict separation between church and state, because the people that make up the state are people of faith.
Yes.
I know you're a man of faith. I consider myself a man that tries to be a man of faith, at least. And I let my Christian faith inform what I do. Being a judge is not an easy thing to do. And if you can see right behind me, there's a prayer that I had hanging right next to my door as I would walk up to the bench. And it's to remind myself that what I do is part of God's plan. It's part of being a good citizen and making our community better for each other, for my children. I don't see this great wall between the church and the state. The church, the faith that each one of us has, can greatly inform and make us a better nation. And any attempt to shut down faith or churches completely from being a part of the community, contributing members of our society, is doing us a great disservice. And I believe having that separation, that strict separation, is not only improper, it's not part of the Constitution.
Fabulous. Well, I think the last question, or what I'd like to say here, because this has been a great interview and it has enlightened me quite a bit. And so is there anything else that you would like all of the viewers here to know and to talk about your campaign as the last wrap around here?
Well, I want to thank those that have given me such great support. It's been a month since I announced I was running, and the outpour of support has been great. I am nothing if not the support of those that are around me. My wife, my children, as young as they can be 4, 2, and then I have another one on the way. They're the greatest motivators. I am just so thankful for all that support. And as people are making up their minds of who to vote for, I think it's important to keep in mind the philosophy of a judge which I've already explained as to reading the law as it's written, interpreting it, and applying it as it's written, and having someone with the experience of having been on the court before asking for a promotion to a court of appeals. That's very important. I ask that people really take a look at that before making a decision on what the qualifications are. Now, I've been a lifelong Republican. Like I said, Dad did not raise a socialist. And one of my first jobs in college was working for the grassroots development team for the Republican National Committee. And we helped increase the majority of Republicans in Congress in 2002. I later became a clerk for Senator John Cornyn in the Judiciary, the U.S. Senate. I was then a briefing attorney for one of our Republican-appointed federal judges in McAllen. And obviously, I've run in one of the blue counties of our state as a Republican judge. And that matters because I am unafraid of calling myself a conservative and asking for a promotion based on my qualifications and my experience on the bench. And I just ask for continued support.
Well, that's excellent. Are you going to have either a Facebook or Twitter or something where we can go to find further information? And most of all, to get further donations from all of the viewers out there, because it takes money to run a campaign. I've been there, you've been there. And so can you just kind of let us know how we can get to you?
Absolutely. My website is fonsecaforjustice.com. You can find my bio and some information as well as the link to my Facebook page. And for donations, like you said, unfortunately, things don't just happen for free. We've got to pay for them. No small donation is too small. No donation is too small. There is a donation page on the webpage, fonsecaforjustice.com. And you can find me on Facebook. I'm very active on Facebook. The handle is @JudgeFonseca, @JudgeFonseca. So feel free to add me as a friend. If I still have any slots left, I'm close to my 5,000 limit on my personal page. But for sure on the official page @JudgeFonseca on Facebook, you can find the link to the page on my website, fonsecaforjustice.com.
Well, great. Then thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening.